Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us at the 2024 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Cameron Russell. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it is my pleasure to introduce our panel, Leveraging Sports Betting to Enhance the Fan Experience, sponsored by Sportradar. Our panelists today are Brian Josephs, VP of Sales and Client Success at Sportradar, Keith Goldner, VP of Data Science at FanDuel, Eric Rimsky, VP of US Fantasy and Betting at the NBA, and Megan Burgoon, Senior Director for Bet Content Integration at ESPN. Our panel will be moderated by Jacob Feldman from Sportico. So the panel will run for 45 minutes, and we'll leave approximately 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please submit any questions via our Cadence app, which you can do throughout the entirety of the panel. You can navigate to this via the schedule pane in the menu and navigate specifically to the Leveraging Sports Betting to Enhance the Fan Experience event. Questions can then be submitted there and will be selected by the moderator. Now with that, I will turn it over to you, Jacob.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we were just talking backstage. I think for some of us, it feels like sports betting has been a big business in America for a very long time, but it actually is fairly new. It's great to go from chess, which was the oldest game in town, to sports betting, which is in many ways the newest game in town, especially here in Massachusetts. We're less than 1 year into it. But even in this short amount of time, I think behind the scenes of the betting apps everybody uses, the lines everybody sees, there has been already a revolution in the way data is being used to create those bets, the way those bets are being tracked, and the way these offerings are evolving. So Brian, I want to start with you. How have you seen the way we're using data to inform sports betting applications evolve over the last 3 years?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob, and thanks everyone for coming out this morning. And in case you're not familiar, Sportradar is the leading sports technology company in the world, and we work with all sides of the industry, sports betting operators, media and tech companies, as well as leagues and teams. And you might not even know it, but I would guess that just about everyone in this room has consumed our products and services in some form or fashion as you engage with sports. And if you look at, to Jacob's point, over the last 3 to 5 years, what we've seen the biggest shift in is demand around the depth of data, and that's been driven by consumer behavior and interest in new, differentiated, and unique betting markets. So from a Sportradar standpoint, as that consumer behavior has changed, it's been a big focus on us to not just deliver the data and content to our clients that is required to deliver the main markets, but what else can we provide that will allow a deeper and more robust product experience and ultimately a more engaging experience for the end consumer.
And Keith, for you, being so responsible for the modeling and what the predictions look like, how have you seen the amount of data available to you change, the types of data change, and where might you see things going on that front?
Yeah, just in general, anytime you can get good and more data, you're going to be able to build better and more accurate models. So recent trends have been more on the player tracking side. There's different restrictions in different states, but we were able to offer something in the Super Bowl around using the next-gen stats data from the NFL. We have a great relationship with the NFL and next-gen stats.
Like sprint speed and
yeah,
things like
the fastest
that, yeah.
offensive ball carrier. So that's obviously like a very new type of market, still being developed, but it was like a cool offering that we were able to have. But in general, like our two jobs are, one, to price up anything that somebody might find interesting to bet on, anything that a consumer might want, and then do it accurately so that we can mitigate risk and have the best product and offer the best prices out there.
And Eric, coming from the league side, what are fans looking for? What are bettors looking for?
Yeah, so PASPA repealed 6 years ago. We were thinking about sports betting even before that happened, and we had a real lean towards fantasy prior to that. We had been working with Yahoo for a while. FanDuel was our daily fantasy partner at the time, and so we were very focused on the engagement benefits of how fantasy and eventually sports betting could enhance the fan experience, and that was always the lens that we looked at sports betting and the eventual legalization. Now, 6+ years later, we're at 30 states that have mobile online sports betting. 60% of the adult population can bet on sports if they choose to. And for us, it's always been about giving fans an optionality to focus on sports betting and sports betting content if that's something that they're most interested in. And so for us, what we've seen through our players, and particularly through the teams that are most competitive leading to the end of the season, is tailoring certain products to fans who want to engage in that way. And for us, the more the fans are watching, the more that they have a propensity to bet, that's a virtuous cycle for us, because the more then they bet or are following their fantasy teams, the more they're watching, and so it has numerous benefits.
Yeah, and I think the storytelling aspect comes into it there as well, right? I think for a while betting was off in this silo, something some people did, but I think we've seen companies like ESPN recognize there's some interesting stories to tell here, some narratives. I'm curious how you guys as a company and you personally have come to think about the role betting plays in that storytelling aspect, the reason that we all come to sports in the first place.
Yeah, so I think sports betting and talking sports betting is just like talking sports, you know? I think we know that our audience is certainly interested in it. We want to get as close to the game as we possibly can because it's a really interesting storyline to talk through the lens of betting. And so we're working really hard, and I think it's really one of the cornerstones of our content strategy is to integrate betting content into as many places as we can. And it's, you know, such a priority for us that they actually switched my role into that space. So, you know, thank you. So, you know, working with different show groups and identifying best practices and working with our social team to make all of this stuff come to life has been a real big success for us in the last several months.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you guys are the newest of the new games in town. ESPN Bet, I don't know, is it 4 months or something like that since launch? So in that period, what have you learned about the type of storytelling people are interested in? Is it advice on what to bet? Is it stories from talent in terms of them celebrating their wins and mourning their losses? What is that kind of content that is resonating thus far?
Yeah, I think we're learning a lot about our users and what they want. You know, it's really not a one-size-fits-all journey for us. And so the content that we are, you know, producing on social feels different than the content we're producing on, say, SportsCenter. So, you know, we're really thoughtful about who we're reaching and where we're reaching them. We had an internal discussion earlier this week that was focused very heavily on women, and a study that came out that said, you know, working mothers have only 60 minutes a day to themselves, which is insane. But there's a lot of women who they want to participate in this space, and so how are we going to reach them? How are we going to reach that audience authentically? And maybe that's, for me, I'm mindlessly scrolling Instagram at the end of the day. Maybe that's where we need to focus our content.
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I would say the storytelling part is just so important. And at the NBA, we work very closely with ESPN on that. And we don't want to necessarily plaster betting information everywhere. It's all about aiding in that storytelling element of the game. And so, for example, we had worked with ESPN on something called First to 15 in the NBA. And that's just about, like, which team is going to get off to the fastest start. And that's a betting market that translates through FanDuel, but it's about meeting fans where they are and helping them enjoy the elements of the game and not necessarily putting betting information in front of them. And the telecast is just different from the way you would treat another channel because that storytelling element is so important when fans are tuning in and watching the game.
Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
you watch sports for the narrative, and whether that's the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift stuff going on, as a result, the Travis Kelce anytime touchdown is the most popular market. You want to be part of that, and so the content is a huge part of that. We've got this new thing called The Rush, where we're basically trying to take what's the story that's going on right now, whether it be live or otherwise, and put it at the forefront so that people can participate and engage with that sort of thing. And similarly, one of the biggest bet types right now is same game parlay, SGP, and the reason it's so popular among customers is because when you watch a sporting event, you form a narrative in your head. You form the narrative for the Super Bowl that Travis Kelce is going to go off because of all the drama surrounding it. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win, Travis Kelce to score a touchdown, and the total to go over. And that way, you feel that this is the story that you can root for and that you believe is going to happen.
And there's obviously a huge data challenge and modeling challenge, A, and B, the live aspect of creating those in real time. How are you guys thinking about making that more accessible, making more of those in-game options available?
Yeah, those are the major challenges that we face as like a data science team and as a risk and trading team. Is doing it pre-match is very challenging, making sure that all the correlations, that the reason same game parlay wasn't offered for such a long time is because you need to understand that if Travis Kelce scores, that the Chiefs are then more likely to win and understand all those correlations. And then trying to do that live that's the real challenge, especially with players, which the U.S. is a very player-driven market. It's very, like, people root for their favorite players. They want to bet on their favorite players. And yeah, those are the major challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, and I'd like to pick that up a little bit. The fortuitous cycle that Eric just mentioned is something that really shouldn't be glossed over. It's really critical to everything that's going on right now, as well as the shift to in-play. And from a Sportradar standpoint, We sit on such a robust database that we're collecting in real time for both, call it your traditional sports statistics as well as the player tracking. And where we're really investing heavily and focusing our time is how do we use cutting edge technologies to derive value from that data, value being new markets that our clients can ultimately take to market and be bet on, as well as content and insight that can be delivered in real time to help end consumers be better informed and make that decision. So when you look at that content storytelling piece as a start of that cycle, when you're a fan and you're watching a game or consuming sports through a particular product, as information and content flows to you, that gives you the opportunity to form an opinion and ultimately take action. And then to Eric's point, once you take action and place that bet, you ultimately consume more content. And that's the cycle that all of us are playing different roles in helping to facilitate that will just continue to grow the sports industry and frankly, our businesses as well.
Yeah, Eric, you may have thoughts on this, and Brian, I'm sure too. I'm curious how you've seen the fan demand for data, especially in real time even, evolve. I think basketball is a great example. People understand, increasingly on-off splits and live shot probabilities. And how do you think about balancing giving people access to that without overwhelming them, making it easy for them to find what they want without giving everything? I'm curious kind of the conversations that are going on about making that data available to the fan and explaining it at the same time.
Yep. So I think this is maybe more of the PhD audience, but
yeah.
We don't necessarily want to create content that can only be understood by those who are wired a certain way. We'll frame it that way. So what we really focus on is to not be overly complex, but to take complex data sets and make it very simple and easy to understand so that it's not overwhelming and it's not too much. And a space that we really like for this type of experimentation is over-the-top streaming as an opportunity to deliver different content experiences around a particular game. And we developed a product called MBet, where you can run betting lines, insights directly through that product into a streaming experience. And again, to those who would like to engage, they will have the option to do so. And we think that's really important so as to not overwhelm and ultimately deliver a fantastic fan experience.
Yeah, so we're partnering with Sportradar and MBet. We're very excited about it because it gives fans some of that optionality to have an opinion and potentially place a bet, inside of an experience. And, to Brian's point, creating content that can be consumed easily by fans who are just following the game and potentially have an opinion that can be translated into betting markets online, like through FanDuel. I think that's where it really all comes together. You utilize the content through a telecaster like ESPN that's telling a storyline. The data is being fed in, and then the operator can showcase those lines, and you can have an opinion in real time. And that's where in-play betting becomes a huge part of what we're doing moving forward. You see Steph Curry goes on a run, you want to say, okay, how many points is he going to score before the end of the game? You want to have that line be available to you. And so it is a cycle where we're all playing a role to make sure the fan experience is at its pinnacle.
You've touched on something too that is it's a new. You said in the very beginning, sports betting is new, and the biggest barrier to entry is learning about sports betting, learning the lingo, learning how stuff works, and
right. You feel uncomfortable. Yeah,
you feel uncomfortable. You're putting your own money down to do it. That you want to feel educated. So being able to do that in a simple way, I imagine that you're, especially with ESPN Bet being new, and you have this sports user base who understands numbers because they're sports fans. But I imagine that's a huge part of what you all are focused on is educating on what a spread is, what a total is, and making people feel comfortable so that they can engage and enjoy.
Yeah, we're making those connections, and I think that's what's really important to us. So with our 12 million fantasy players that we had this year, they probably understand sports betting more than they think, but it's up to us to make that connection for them, slow down, add that context. So, if you're talking about one of your fantasy players, you probably understand what a prop bet is and can make a decision off of that as well. So that's certainly something that we're really focused on to bring to life.
Yeah, how does that inform what you're thinking in terms of what you're offering, what you're explaining? How are you thinking about simplifying the options or explaining the options while presenting all of them at the same time and letting people kind of choose as best they can?
Yeah, we're really focused on that casual fan and converting them into being a casual bettor. It should say I was the second person to mention Taylor Swift on the stage, so
two down, two to go.
The first. Yeah. So taking storylines from pop culture or other areas How can we explain sports betting through the lens of something that is really popular right now? Joe Fortenbaugh, who's on ESPN Bet Live, does a really great job of, hey, here's my bet for tonight, and here's why. But adding that context and really slowing down and explaining that has been really beneficial for our audience, because if you are just coming into this space, it can be really overwhelming. If you are opening up a sportsbook app for the first time and you are just staring at numbers, you might say, nope, not today. So how do we make people understand what all of those numbers mean so they can participate and they can watch and have their palms sweat a little bit? We're really trying to help everybody make sense of that.
Yeah, and you've touched on it, but I think bringing the talent in is also a huge factor of saying, oh, I know him. If he's explaining it, it's a little easier to kind of get the ball rolling, I imagine.
Absolutely. And so, our talent is on our air all the time. You recognize Mike Greenberg. He's a perfect example of what we want to be creating content around. And so, Mike has a show every day, every morning on ESPN. He is talking about sports betting on it. He has a market inside of the ESPN Bet app that might correlate to what he's talking about. And so we're really trying to be able to meet our consumers where they are, and have stretch the ESPN ecosystem as far as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think we've talked about data from the player, the action side, but the fan data is as important as anything when it comes to developing these products, right? How have you guys evolved your ability to collect that data? What are you looking at specifically, and how is it informing what's being offered? I don't know, Eric, if you want to weigh in there first.
We have a program at the NBA called NBA ID, which is our membership program, which launched last year. And the emphasis is rewarding our fans for being fans of the NBA, for following. I know there was an example recently where NBA ID members had the opportunity to vote on the All-Stars, and their vote counted as part of the overall calculation for who wound up making the game. But as we think about it from the fantasy and betting lens, the opportunity to work with fans who have submitted their information through NBA ID is a way to engage in a personalized way with them. So we'll ask for sort of your typical information around first name, last name, email address, but also things like favorite team, where do you live, how do you consume the games? And then from our perspective, when we're thinking about how we're engaging people with fantasy and betting type products, then we have a better sense of what it is that they're most interested in. And I think as artificial intelligence and technology continues to expand over time, that's what we're very much focused on, is that personalization. How do we meet fans where they are with the information that they want? And so when it comes to a bet type, making sure that we are surfacing the types of bets that the fan would be most interested in the time that they're watching it, so that it's leads to the best kind of experience for them.
Yeah, we can weigh on this as well. So that's really the missing piece towards personalization. And what we're talking about here is how you create more markets to help power same game parlay and other experiences. And as the options to bet and the content that's put in front of sports fans continues to just grow and grow and grow in volume, at the end of the day, that's going to create a discovery problem for the end consumer. So with all of these different options, or maybe content that I'm not as familiar with, what do I do? How do I find what's relevant for me? And from Sportradar standpoint, we've launched a Fan ID initiative to really help round out that cycle and collect that zero-party data, first-party data, to help better understand that end consumer and how they consume content across platform, basically across the broader sports ecosystem, so that we can marry the right content with the right betting market with the right user, and really deliver that personalized experience, so that when I log into the FanDuel app, for example, I have a very different experience than Eric or Jacob or anyone else that would log in. And that is, again, critical in terms of where we're going, how you differentiate, how you continue to capture the time and attention of the end consumer. So that end user data is just mission critical and a tremendous area of focus.
And for you, when you're looking at the modeling side, how much are you looking at what people are betting on when you're just trying to figure out where to put resources or how to create markets?
Yeah, so I would say we're not looking at least my team isn't looking at the fan data too much. There's other teams that are more focused on the customer behavior. We're very focused on the sports stuff. But what I will say is we're always trying to come up with the next innovative markets that people are going to want to consume. And so we're looking, when we test out new ones, it's this experimental process where we'll throw something out there, we'll build a model for it, the traders will focus on getting it out there. And if we see that it has a lot of action, adjusting for things like where it is on the page and that sort of thing, then we know to build out other markets like that in the future, or to lean into that and turn on same game parlay, that sort of stuff. So that's how my team is thinking about it, is more from like a product standpoint. But there are other teams within FanDuel who are focusing more on the personalization side of things.
As the options expand, has your job gotten easier or harder as you've gotten access to more data, but now you're being asked to create more markets? There's more out there.
Building the models is easier, but managing the models is harder, right? Especially with same game parlay, there's such a giant attack surface where as a sportsbook, we have to price everything up, every single possible combination. But as a user, you just have to find one hole in it. And so a huge part of our job is the risk mitigation and testing everything that we're doing so that hopefully we don't have giant holes in what we're doing.
And we talked a little bit about personalization. I think one of the interesting things to me as a consumer, as much as anything, is it seems like there's a balance between I want a very personalized experience. I want to open an app and I wanted to know the things that maybe even the things I'm actively watching or the things I bet on in the past. On the other hand, I'd want a social experience, right? I want to know what my friends are betting on. I want to know that they're seeing the same bet opportunities that the people on TV are talking about. How do you think about balancing personalization with that sense that everyone is seeing and betting on the same things? I don't know if you want to weigh in there first.
Yeah, I think, kind of marrying my two worlds, fantasy and betting, what makes fantasy so special is that community aspect. So how do we think through making betting have some sort of community aspect there? So I think that that's something that is really important. But when it comes to personalization too, we're serving tons of content every day through the ESPN app and online, and obviously across linear as well. So from a personalization standpoint, what we ultimately want to get to is have a deep understanding of that user and what they want and serving the appropriate content to them. So you're a Cowboys fan, there's a game coming up, how do we serve Cowboys betting content so that you can participate there?
Cowboys fan or Cowboys hater, right? You want to
Exactly.
serve both.
Exactly.
Yeah. Eric, for you at the NBA, and fantasy is another great way to lead in here. People have very specific player affiliations, very specific team affiliations. How is that impacting how you're thinking about the fan experience?
First, I think what Megan said is exactly right. Like taking that experience that you have with fantasy and transporting it over to betting is really important. I mean, for me right now, I have a fantasy football league that I've been in since I was in college 5 or 6 years ago. And, that communication exists through our text change, through our iMessages. And then I think from the operator's perspective, Keith, you should obviously weigh in, like, how do we get that conversation and that community element within the betting experience? Because you want it to be a one-touch experience for fans so that they can, live in the app, have the opportunity to do different things within the app. And that's why you're seeing some of the operators get into other verticals to make sure that they're maintaining as much retention as possible. But from our perspective, the players are such a driver of the conversation around the league. I saw Wembanyama has now surpassed 1 billion views on social. And so for us, engaging with fans outside of just the betting community and making sure that they have the opportunities to share their highlights or talk about their stories outside of it, I think that just drives more attention towards like having an opinion. But, creating that community within the app, I think, is sort of the holy grail.
Yeah, again, it's not really my area of expertise, but this is something that's been tried a lot, both here in the States and in particular overseas, and nobody has quite cracked it, because betting is inherently a social thing. Like, I have the same thing, the group chat with my friends who they're always throwing in what they want to be betting on, but nobody has really solved for how to kind of capitalize on that, which is why I think a lot of the focus, like you said, has been more towards shareable content and that sort of thing, as opposed to the actual betting experience itself.
Fantastic. I literally turned the page here, so I'm going to turn the page to a little bit more forward thinking. What do you see growing the next boom in sports betting? What's going to get people to bet for the first time? What's going to get them more interested in this experience? What's the next step that you guys are thinking about over the next 6 or 12 months?
I mean, I think for us, we're certainly looking at new and innovative content types and how to really reach our audiences where they want to be reached. We just launched ESPN Bet Live. Is that something that we want to make more digital friendly? How do we bring audiences into that show so they can be active participants? There's a lot of different ideas like that we're certainly looking through, but ultimately, we have so many options for innovation, and I also think we have the right team members in place and talent to help really push the envelope.
It's such an interesting question because, while sports betting is new, it exploded, for over a couple of years, and now we have 30 states that have online sports betting, but the roadmap for the United States and new states coming online is significantly slowed down. And North Carolina in the next week or so is going to come online, but then from there, we don't really know what's going to turn on next in California and Texas and all these other states that have not yet legalized sports betting. It's undetermined when that's going to happen. And so the growth has to come from somewhere else, whereas it was just coming from new states coming online over the last several years. And one thing that Megan and I talked about yesterday, we talked a lot about the NBA, but the WNBA is like a really interesting and ripe environment. Caitlin Clark made her announcement that she's going to come out. And so those storylines of where the WNBA is going to be heading, that's something that we're really focused on, because that's an area of growth for us. The league is exploding in popularity. We have a new franchise coming on board. And so we've talked about how we can get that to sort of catch up to the NBA in a lot of ways in terms of how we've been innovative in sports betting.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is we've seen way more interest. The growing popularity of women's sports in particular is awesome. We get way more requests for our team in particular to be developing models around that stuff so that there is parity in offering, that people can bet on what they want to bet on. So that's where I see it going. Also, I think like the more and more mainstream it gets, the lower that barrier to entry gets, the more the education and it becomes more widely available. And other than giant states turning on like Texas and California, like I think that's where you're really going to see the growth, is both people working on the stuff, being able to bet on the stuff that they want to engage with, and having that initial understanding of how the industry works.
Yeah, and I'd say from our perspective, one of the key areas of focus as we look ahead is working, this is where partnerships are going to be really critical, working with our league partners, working with our broadcast partners, and working with our clients from the sportsbook side to shift the betting from pre-match to in-play. And when we look outside the U.S., it's heavily skewed in favor of in-play betting, and as we're a relatively young and immature market here, we think that's a tremendous area of opportunity where the content that can be created from a storytelling standpoint and distributed during the game can be deeper and more focused on what's going on in that actual game, and you can create a particular insight around a player matchup that could be engaging to a fan of that player, a fan of that team. It's just interesting and relevant across the board, but if you're aware of a market that you could place a bet on tied to that information over the course of the game, we think there's a tremendous opportunity there to make live broadcasts more engaging and more sticky and retain that audience throughout the broadcast by telling better stories on what's happening live and during that actual game, and then offering, again, with partners and clients of ours, markets that they can take action on. So that shift from pre-match to in-play, all the different stakeholders involved, is going to be a critical component as we look in whatever time period you said, this next stretch here that we're moving
that's
into.
The whole thing is like, it's on the broadcast now. It is it's becoming mainstream, and all three of you are dealing with this both pre-match in terms of content and like during the game. And when you see that during the game and people see those numbers every day, it's the same reason that like OPS is not a taboo thing in baseball anymore, because it started being on the broadcast all the time.
Yeah, last year for the XFL, I think what we really did well was highlight things graphically. So if you were watching an XFL game last year on our air, when an over would hit, we would have some sort of graphical element to go along with that. And I think that's really fun, especially if you're a better,
pops,
yeah. ESPN bet logos.
Unless you had the under, but otherwise very exciting.
Yeah.
And that, what is going to unlock that? Because I think there's a few different challenges, right? There's the technical aspect of how do we integrate these things? How do we keep them live? How do we keep them synced up and not spoil it? Things along those lines. There's the marketing or communications aspect of how do we tell people this is available? How do we explain it to them? How do we get them involved? And then there's the product side, right? Of how do we think about integrating this in a way that improves the experience rather than being a distraction? So how do you, which of those three are you thinking the most about? How are you thinking about those challenges kind of all interweaving with each other?
I mean, I think it's going to take some conversations with the leagues and get them really comfortable. So Eric and I are going to sit here now and negotiate the NBA, WNBA deal.
Sure. You got 20 minutes. You're on the
That's,
clock.
we're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, I do think that it is, having conversations with the leagues and making sure that they understand what we're doing, what we're trying to provide, making sure from a technical aspect that we have the capabilities to do that. And then innovation from there. But I think we have all the right pieces going. It's just a matter of when do you want to do it.
So yeah, from the league side, what is your response? What are you thinking about as you're considering these options?
I feel like I'm on the spot.
Well, you are. You're
negotiation.
literally on the spot right here.
Well, I think the good thing is that we're all incentivize for the experience to be as good as possible for fans, because that's what's going to lead to more viewership, that's going to lead to more bets, that's what's going to lead to more opportunities for fans to engage with data. And so we're all swimming in the same direction, which is really, really beneficial when you have everybody sort of moving together. And particularly given some of the disruption in the media environment generally, having technology catch up, having that personalized experience as linear potentially moves into more of a streaming environment, so you have more of a chance to engage directly with the stream. From our perspective, it's all about having those tools for fans to engage in the way that they want. And the ones who choose sports betting, they should have the opportunity to do that.
And Brian, I'll put you on the spot now. We can take Eric off for a second. But I'm curious, from your clients, what are they asking you the most for? What are they demanding from you? What are you trying to deliver more and more as time moves forward?
Yeah, so there's a lot of conversation on just doing something. Everyone wants to do something new or unique or find a different angle and tell a differentiated story. How do we differentiate our product? How do we differentiate our broadcast and take that next step? And that's certainly a challenge, but one of the ways that we've really leaned into that conversation with clients is leveraging the technologies that we have in-house. I'm going to be the third person to mention AI, and I'll add computer vision to it to collect and analyze data in real time to be able to address this growing demand for finding that unique angle in storytelling. And to build on that a little bit, Megan touched on this, data visualization is becoming increasingly important as well. It's a phenomenal way to tell a story and bring something to life, whether it be through a linear broadcast or an OTT platform. So that's really an area of focus as well, where it's one thing to have a graphic that might communicate an insight in real time that no one's ever seen before, but it's a whole different experience for an end user or a viewer to see data come to life in a way that really tells a compelling story visually. And again, our brains are all wired differently. Some people learn different ways, and I think that visual component as well is one that will really start to move things along and make things that are content, data, information that might seem intimidating much more approachable, and create some moments. Oh, okay, I get it now. And that's really what we're going for at the end of the day, to get to that point with the end user and deliver that good experience.
Speaking of graphics, I do wish we had a little over pop up when we hit 2.5 AI references. You could really engage the audience in a much more direct way. I did want to ask, we can talk on the modeling side. Is there a revolution when it comes to these AI tools? Is it going to really change things? How much are you already using some of these tools? Where are we at on that?
I think I'm a bit more bearish on this than what you'll hear kind of more in the media. Unless you're calling like kind of traditional logistic regression type stuff, artificial intelligence, then sure, we use it a ton. But we're using it in what I would say are unsexy ways to improve the customer experience. So that's like chatbots for customer service. And I think similar to like what you'd see at Netflix, where you have like traditional machine learning methods for recommending bets and that sort of thing. But I don't think like the ChatGPT and the large language models, maybe in a couple of years I'll be saying this was terrible that I said this, but I don't think that's going to have an enormous impact on the type of stuff that we're doing. We're a big part of what we're focused on is speed as well. Like you said, it has to be live during games. So that's one of the considerations when we're building models. So you won't hear me throwing around the AI buzzwords as much as you might hear other people doing it, but that's kind of like my take on where it is in the industry and where we're
Your
going.
job is safe. Everyone else.
It is for now.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, for me, when I look at the AI possibilities in sports betting, I think a lot about the betting interaction element. Like rather than trying to search for the league and then find the game and then go in through and find the player and then find the points and then find the exact, like being able to just type in, I think LeBron's going to get 20 points. What are the odds? And it's like, here are the odds. Here are your 3 bets. Take that. I think the speed of betting could be improved, but I agree that the modeling is going to be a challenge. I'm curious, are you looking at AI generative content or personalized content?
Not really
Yeah.
for me at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we'll have this conversation in a few
words.
years if
Because the talent is so much more important, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes our content products really special is that human and the human interaction, right? Like people want to come to ESPN to see Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A. Smith. They want to know what our talent is saying. They trust our talent. So especially when it comes to betting, they want to align with the talent that they know and trust.
Yeah, you just hit on the key thing, which is trust, especially in this where you're putting your own money down.
Right.
Trust in the platform, trust in the content, trust in the people. That is a huge part of making sure that you are comfortable engaging with something that's new.
We at the NBA have been working with an NBA AI chatbot, and so I guess I'll take the other side of this
The
argument.
big unveiling at NBA All-Star Game was Adam Silver up there talking to a chatbot. People can find that online if they haven't seen it.
Exactly. And so we've been working on that and testing it in the background. And we find a lot of fans are coming and asking the chatbot for fantasy and betting advice. You know, asking them what do they think is going to happen in the game, who's going to win, how many points does a particular player score. You know, 10% plus of the people who are engaging with the chatbot are focused specifically on that. And when we think about AI and how that chatbot could exist in the future and potentially impact the user experience, you know, when fans are talking about the game, a lot of times what they're talking about and what they're thinking about doesn't necessarily surface in a bet, or it's hard to find. Discoverability sometimes can be a challenge on operator sites. So utilizing a chatbot or some sort of functionality, we can say, look, I think LeBron James is going to score 40 points tonight and he's going to have a triple-double. And so surfacing that bet and what the odds are for that, so you can focus specifically on what you think is going to happen versus, you know, clicking through player pages, trying to find that specific market. And so in that realm, I'm hopeful and think that AI will be helpful in terms of making the customer experience a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, it also helps with the barrier to entry thing. We have a new product that we've been testing out where you can essentially say, like, you click on a few buttons that's like, hey, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think LeBron's going to go off. And you click those 3 things, and then it will generate a same-game parlay that follows that narrative. And that way, you're talking about it as a sports fan in like regular sports terms, and then you're still able to engage with the content that way.
Fantastic. We have a couple minutes left here and a ton of really great questions. I'm going to try to squeeze these in as much as I can. Someone asked about esports betting, and I'm curious your guys' opinions on that and what you are offering. But also people peer-to-peer betting, right? Like being able to bet on the Madden game I'm playing. I'm curious where you see that going. But on the esports front, is that something ESPN Bet is offering or something you're looking at?
Not something we are currently looking at. I mean, I think what we're doing right now is really being thoughtful with expanding the markets that we currently have. We want to make sure that we're really nailing the basics, and then we'll expand upon that. And we're also just following trends. If something starts to really pop, we're absolutely going to follow that.
Fantastic. Keith, people here are kind of asking you to give away your state secrets, so I'll let you decide how you want to answer this. But
yeah, just come up to me afterwards, and I'm happy to tell everybody everything that we do.
Yeah. The code is in your phone, right? You can just airdrop it away. But people are asking how you are able to process data so quickly to run simulations, especially in-game and same-game. How has that evolved, or what are some of the tools you're using there?
We're lucky that we have very talented data scientists and engineers that we work with. I mean, most of my job at this point, I'm not doing much coding anymore.
You're up here talking.
I'm up here talking. I'm trying to hire the best people and retain the best people, and I'm very fortunate that I have such a talented team, an entire engineering and risk and trading staff to do this sort of stuff. So that's what I would say is find the best people, and then you'll get the best product.
Fantastic. Eric, I'll lob this one to you. I'm curious, we've talked about how important the players are. How do you think about using the players or integrating them into this conversation, especially around fantasy and around betting, and helping them kind of create relationships with people who maybe are coming to them through these lenses?
I think the players are at such a forefront of the way the league markets itself. You know, it's very much a superstar-driven league. The players are visible, they're huge. You know, if you're sitting courtside at the NBA game, there's really no experience like that. And so having the players at the forefront of everything that we do permeates in sports betting like it would in any other business line that we have. You know, when I think about players and I think about betting, I go back to sort of the storytelling element that we touched on in the beginning of the panel and sort of how that leads into the experience. And so we've started to test with putting like spreads and over-unders inside the main telecast. But I think taking that a step further and showcasing what players' probabilities are and how they're performing as compared to expectations is another place that we would go in the future. We know that NBA player prop bets over-index as compared to all the other professional sports leagues. That's just dovetailing from their popularity in general. So I think to the extent that we're able to showcase more of what players' expectations are and how they might meet or exceed them, that's really, you know, where players will be a focal point moving forward.
That makes total sense. We talked a little bit about women's sports. Another question here, you know, if you had to put money down today, what sport do you see having the largest growth opportunity within sports betting? Some people mention women's sports. Some people ask about NASCAR and racing. I'm curious where you're thinking, or maybe so far what surprised you in terms of where there has been demand already.
I mean, I am going to say WNBA is an area I'm really excited about, and I think one of the benefits that we have is we have the women's tournament on our air. And what we've seen, especially from a fantasy perspective, because we have Women's Tournament Challenge and then we have the only full season fantasy WNBA game as well, is just that timeline works so well to create interest. So, right now we have all this Caitlin Clark chatter. The tournament's going to be amazing. There's all these superstars that are going to be playing in it. So for the next month and a half, and then leading into the draft and then the start of the season. So, again, being the superstar-driven league, prop bets and talking about betting and how it aligns with the WNBA is certainly something I'm really excited about. And hopefully it's a place where we can continue to be really innovative in as well.
I was just going to say, I would echo everything that you just said. WNBA in particular, we're having conversations about hiring data scientists entirely dedicated to that, which we wouldn't have said a couple of years ago, and it's just a really, really exciting time. The other thing is we're in Canada as well, so hockey's obviously much bigger up there, and so we've had renewed focus on that too.
Fantastic. Yeah, I enjoyed the Fantasy W product last year, but you already get the sense. I came to appreciate how important the media ecosystem around it is. It's hard to find data. It's hard to find injury information. I mean, you get the sense of you start to realize how big this industry is once you try to do it when it's in a nascent stage like that.
Yeah.
Brian, I'll throw this question to you because I'm curious what you think. We talked a little bit about differentiation, but what do you think are going to be the key points of differentiation for fantasy or sports betting apps and products going forward?
Yep. So to look at the product experience, we touched on personalization a lot over the last stretch here. I think, obviously a lot of our clients are already putting a lot of focus on that initial landing page, like what do you see immediately upon your arrival into the app, and I think that is going to be mission critical. And to Megan's point, especially if you're a new bettor, you log in, and you're greeted with a bunch of information. It might be overwhelming. So I think we as consumers have been trained because of experiences we have elsewhere, whether it be the search that we were talking about or some of the social media apps that we engage in, that when we open something up, we're immediately seeing something that is really interesting and relevant to us and the motivation behind going into that app. So I think that's where you'll see a lot of time, focus, and energy from a product standpoint to make sure that entry into the product experience is one that is really tailored and fits that end user who's logging in.
Fantastic. We have a couple minutes here, so I'll throw the final question to you and we can kind of go down the line. But if you're putting a bet down today, a year from now on this panel when we're talking sports betting, what do you think is going to be the biggest topic of conversation?
Ooh, I mean, selfishly, I hope we're talking about women's sports and just the amount that people have bet on it over the course of the year, and not just speaking about WNBA, but women's soccer is having a moment. It's going to be really interesting. The other one I'm really curious about is Olympics.
Yeah.
And how sports betting from a content perspective is going to be integrated into that experience.
Yeah, Olympics is a really interesting one because I remember 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I guess, because of COVID, but it was still, sports betting was still so new.
Yeah.
And I think there was less interest in it than maybe some people thought or expected. So it's really interesting, people associate football and basketball and these sports with betting, and figuring out what the markets are, how to frame the bets, I think is going to be really pivotal this summer and going forward for the Olympics and Olympic sports beyond that.
Oh, yeah.
Your bet for next year?
I think that just the overall convergence of betting and media, and what does that mean? Media companies that are partnering with betting companies, and what does that fan experience look like in terms of consuming a game and betting at the same time? We've already started working with Sportradar to think really closely about what that fan experience looks like, whether it's going to be on your connected devices, whether it's going to be through viewing games through your phone. And so as there's further disruption within the media ecosystem, moving from linear to digital, as we talked a little bit about, how does that impact fan experience, and how are fans going to be engaging with their operator, partner, and also the game simultaneously?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just hoping it continues growing more mainstream. We're still at a point where even with the major sports where not all the operators are offering same game parlay, there's very few who are offering same game parlay live during the games. So I still think there's a lot of ground to be made up in terms of the product itself and what customers actually want to be using and betting on. I don't know that that's what we're going to be talking about on the panel, but I think that's the direction we're going. Hopefully, maybe we're talking about California or Texas somewhat moving in that direction, but otherwise that's...
Yeah, and then, I guess I'll wrap by saying I would love to see the personalization that we've talked about really start to come into play from a streaming standpoint, from an app standpoint, and some of the storylines that we're talking about on shifting to in-play really start to come to life. And working with partners and clients, they're both on stage here and others who are not, to really bring that to life, and for the end consumers to really start to feel something different when they're engaging in sports and feeling like it's really built for them. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for that we're hard at work on at the moment, and things have, knock on wood, calmed a little bit to where the product experience is really going to be a critical focus over this next stretch, and we can really bring that to life. Yeah,
fantastic. Appreciate you saying that, because I agree 100% that I think we're in this really interesting time now where the stage has been set in many ways, and now the game is really on. So thank you guys so much for taking the time today. Thank you all for the terrific questions. We'll be around all day, so feel free to find these guys in the hall, and you can ask your specific questions as well. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.